So the main topic is going to be about that. Now, on burnout, the problem with burnout, let me get through this very quickly. The problem with burnout is when we try to learn one thing over and over and over and over, it can overload our brain. It's just the matter where we have to take time to process information. And part of that is stepping away. Now, when you're learning, it can be hard to step away and just let go of everything because we want to keep progressing. We want to keep learning. We want to keep improving. So instead of stepping away completely, what you can do is change your view on certain things. Start practicing other things aside from animation, specifically animation. What this does is it helps you to refocus and to continue learning while still letting your brain take a break. Now, you should also take full breaks where you just step away and relax on things. That is very important. But these allow you to take mini breaks and still push your skills. Additionally, they help you learn faster because you are learning side skills that will help improve your main skill. So this is what I want to talk about. And this is something, the reason I want to talk about this now is that it is something that applies to everyone. We have some, the new animation mentor term is starting. So there's going to be new students starting. This applies to new students. When you're learning animation, you can do these extra tests as a way of supplementing your knowledge on things if you have extra time. If you're currently learning how to animate and you've been doing it for a while, these can help you get a new perspective on things. And if you're graduated and you're already animating and you're in the industry, this gives you a way to break away from the day-to-day job and learn extra skills that will help you improve at your job. So it kind of goes to everyone. It's good for everyone. Now, many of you will have heard of this before if you've been in my Q&As, but I figured I'd give the full list because I've talked about these kind of randomly throughout the years, but I don't know if I've ever done like a full list all at once. So that's going to be the topic for today. And Bormark, I just saw that, so take a sip. I'm so glad I have that emote, or else I'd totally forget to hydrate. So, with that said, let's jump in. And as usual, if anyone has questions on these, definitely let me know. I'm going to try to go through them quickly, quickly. So I'm going to try to go through them as quickly as possible so we're not spending too much time on each one. But if anyone wants more information on any of them, definitely let me know. So let's jump in here. So quick turns into a rant. Exactly. I don't know if I've done anything quickly in my whole life. I am so easily distracted. So the first thing that I recommend, above all else, as an animator, while it is not necessary, one of the skills that will help you the most as an animator, regardless of what you do, 2D animation, CG animation, anything, is simply learn to draw. Now, as animators, especially CG animators, we don't need to learn how to draw in amazing detail. We don't have to be able to draw Disney quality, like the 9 Old Men, that kind of stuff. It's really just being able to put down ideas quickly on paper. And this can be daunting. Some of us just aren't great at drawing. Like for me, it's taken me a long time to get somewhat decent at drawing. Others, you might have just trouble drawing in general. It might not be something that you like to do. But knowing some shorthands of how to create a pose can be helpful. So as a quick example here, let's say I want to draw a character just standing. If I can learn how to do a quick thumbnail, so for example, I don't have to be able to draw, and let's make sure I draw with the right color. I don't have to be able to draw a full like character, get the muscles in there, the trapezius. Okay, get the deltoids in there, get the chest in there. I don't have to start doing all of this to be I'm just drawing a horrible muscle man. I don't have to be able to do all of that to be able to draw and get a pose in there. That's too much. Instead, you can do simple things. So one of my favorites is the keyframe drawing, or keyhole drawing, I should say, where you just basically draw this, and there you go. It's a little keyhole with arms and legs. Additionally, you could simplify it even more and just do stick figure drawings. I wouldn't recommend doing the traditional stick figures where it is just the head and then this. That's not going to get you the right kind of analysis of a pose, but just doing this kind of eye shape and then adding arms and legs to it, that can be enough to get you all the information you need to pose out a character and start thinking of the line of action and all of those elements. So, drawing. Now, in terms of drawing, doing thumbnailing, doing all of that can be very helpful. Another thing that you can do, and this is something I highly recommend, is doing gesture drawing. Gesture drawing as well as anatomy studies. Now, this is something that, again, if you're not a fan of drawing, you don't really have to do, but it is a hugely helpful skill because it allows you to learn how the body works very quickly. And it's something I've actually started getting back into myself in the last week. So what are gesture drawings? For many of you, you've heard me talk about them before, but gesture drawings are basically quick drawings that allow you to study a pose and try to capture the movement of it, the gesture of it. Anatomy studies, on the other hand, are slower drawings that focus on understanding the anatomy of the character, where the muscles go, where the bones work, all of that. Both of these are good. In terms of animation, gesture drawing is definitely going to be the one that I highly recommend more, because it's more what we as animators focus on when we're animating. The reason anatomy studies are helpful is that it allows us to understand how the body works so that we don't accidentally break it when we're animating, or we know when to break it and when to exaggerate things. Now, in terms of books, I believe there's a button right up above there somewhere that it looks like a little Amazon logo. If you click on that, there's a whole list of books that I recommend. There should be a whole section on anatomy books. Now, just to kind of give a visual example of gesture drawing, these are some of the ones that I have done in the last week. So you can see this is just a big page of drawings that I was doing, and they're just very quick. You can see they're very rough as well. These are, I think, 30-second drawings, so each one is about 30 seconds. These ones here are about a minute, I think. And it's just trying to understand the pose and the gesture, the line of action. I see Catra. Yes, I've got a few kind of character studies as well. And just all sorts of different poses. And as I'm doing these, I'm trying to understand the gesture as well as understanding some of the elements of the body and how the body works as it's moving. So a lot of this is just done in one day. And then I've got more here. As I'm doing it, I can also do, you can see this is an anatomy study. So I'm trying to understand how the leg works, how the muscles work in there, how the back works, all the muscles in there, and just trying to get an understanding. Does it take long? No. Now, when you're first starting out, 30 seconds per is going to be very fast. It's going to be hard to do. But as you get experience, it doesn't take long. You start to understand how to improve. And you can see in if these are 30 seconds, in 25 minutes, I could do 50 drawings. That's 50 poses that I've analyzed and tried to understand how it works. That allows you to really get a lot of practice in very quickly. And you can do more time, less time, whatever works best for you. So these are, again, more practice. On top of that, whenever I kind of feel bored about doing gesture drawings, I'll do style tests. So here I was just trying to understand how to draw different noses, different mouths, different eyes. I'm not very good at drawing them unless I really study, but you can see I kind of just go back and forth. And it's just kind of exploration in order to try and understand how things move. Now this was one trying to understand how the forms of the body work. Quick tests. Now, some of these are faster and then others are slower. Here was an exploration of the way the muscle works, specifically the shoulder and pecs. I like this guy's face. So, gesture drawing. It is hugely helpful because it allows you to start learning how to pose out characters and how to improve at your drawing and, well, at your posing. Which means when you get into animation, when you are trying to figure out a pose, you don't have to try and pose out a rig. Posing out a rig is slow. Posing out a rig takes time. If you can quickly do a little stick figure drawing, so for example, if you want a character maybe kind of squatting down and picking at the ground, maybe they dropped something. Well, instead of trying to draw and pose or trying to pose out the whole rig, if I use this little guy right here, I could quickly just figure out my line of action, where the hips go. Let's kind of get one foot in there. Maybe the other leg comes down here. And let's get the shoulders in. If he's reaching towards the ground, that one shoulder is going to be lower. Something like that. And there we go. We've got a pose, and that took, what, 10 seconds, 15 seconds to do? Which I can now do variations of and test whether it works. So, very quick. Now, a couple of sites, and hey, Greg actually posted one of them already. So, Line of Action is one of my favorites. The other one is Quick Poses. So, these are two websites that I highly recommend you check out. So, let's actually put them on screen here. So, you've got Line of Action. I really like this one because you've got a class mode, which basically you could just do like an hour session and it'll give you 30-second drawings, a minute drawing, 2 5-minute drawings. So you really get that ability to practice and start from gesture drawing and then move on to anatomy studies if you want to. And then you have Quick Poses as well. Quick Poses, very similar. They're just both very nice to have. And yes, Sin Musi's site, definitely check that out. It is a resource haven and heaven. It is amazing. So, drawing, very important. Do you have to draw? No. Especially if you're a CG animator, drawing is not something that needs to be done. It is just something that will help. Now, we've got drawing. What's the next thing? Well, the next thing is master studies. Master studies are essential in understanding and expanding your knowledge of animation. There's only so much we can do by studying real life. Now, that should be the first thing you do. When you are studying, you should be studying from real life. Studying reference, studying film. That gives you the way the body works naturally. From there, we then want to start analyzing animation. So master studies comes in a lot of different ways. For us as animators, the big one is studying animation. So doing an animation analysis, finding a clip online or finding a clip of any cartoon that you want and really studying how they do it, why they make certain choices. And master studies can be done in many different ways. You can do them just by framing through. So for example, let's say I wanted to do a master study of this scene from Inside Out. So we've got this beautiful scene here, and we could study how they animated all of these little elements. So for example, framing through. And if you want this, if anyone's curious about this program, this is Keyframe MP, which I believe I have a link here. Highly recommended for framing through shots. So as we're looking at this, we could frame through and study what they did to make this work. So for example, we get a very slight anticipation here of the hips. So the hips come down right through there before pushing up. And you can see the hips are kind of leading the action. Hips push up, the arms come in, kind of push this really nice straight in the body before we get this nice arc in the hips. The hips come back down, but the foot kind of delays a little bit. It comes up. It keeps going up a little bit more before really coming down into this really nice pose down here with a very clear line of action. So you can start analyzing what they are doing. That's one way of doing master studies. Really nice straight line right there. You can watch how the eyes are focused. The other way of doing master studies is to do draw-alongs. So draw-alongs are where you basically animate the scene along with the shot. So you would take your clip and let's move it right there. And for example, I could just start trying to analyze it by drawing along. So I would kind of get the core body in here. And this is basically the same thing, but you are kind of learning by doing as well. And you could take a lot of time to really study the pose and analyze how it's working, or you could do it very quickly. So you've got, for example, that frame there. We could keep going. What's the down frame here? So we could push a little further. So let's set a key here and make sure I turn on my onion skinning. And you could use like Krita for this. Krita is a nice free program. So her hips come down. We get the anticipation there. Foot, toes still touching the ground there. And I'm doing this very quickly here. You would want to take a little bit more time. But we can really see that there's this bend in the body right here. And then the arm. Kind of got to lean in. And this, I find, helps to really understand the motion of the whole thing a little bit more. You don't have to do this. It takes a little bit more time, and you do want to take your time with this. Don't rush it like I'm doing here. But it'll allow you to understand how the posing works. Now, if you're afraid of doing this on paper, if your drawing skills are not that strong, you could also just try to recreate this on a rig. Take the animation here. That foot's right there. Take the animation and try to recreate the animation using another rig. It's not going to be exactly the same, but you will still get that understanding of the motion. Now, one thing I'm missing here is the character's leaning. So if I kind of look at my shot here and do a straight line, you can see how that's very straight. That's not correct. She's actually got to lean forward. So this is where that master study element comes in, really trying to analyze all the different elements that come into this. That nice straight in there. So we start to get this. And we can try to recreate the animation. Now, we're not copying in the sense of just tracing over and doing this blindly. We are analyzing why things are doing it. What are they anticipating? The hips are anticipating versus the body. What's dragging? What's leading? You are working through the animation to understand why they did it. This is very good. Is it okay to post master studies online as long as you show the reference for them? Yes, as long as you show what you originally referenced, then it's okay. It is a kind of a gray zone, so I wouldn't do it too often, but as long as it's different enough. So one thing I wouldn't do is, let's say, you can do master studies of drawings as well. So you could, for example, take maybe you really like a certain artist and their art style. You could take their drawing and then try to replicate how you draw it. But be very wary, especially if it's a still drawing, of reposting that, because it starts falling into the copy territory. Usually master studies are kind of just for yourself and not for public sharing. If you feel like it's different enough or it's clear enough that you are studying from them and not copying them, then it's okay. It kind of just depends on the shot and how it'll come off, if that makes sense. But it is a wonderful exercise and one that I highly, highly recommend anyone do. Master studies, of all the different things that you can do, are probably going to be some of the most powerful in terms of really pushing your understanding of certain things, especially in terms of drawing style or animation style. Now, on top of that, master studies don't just fall into animation. A few other things you can study when you're doing master studies are composition, cinematography. As animators, we need to understand these in some way. We don't have to be masters at composition and cinematography, but we can push our understanding of it. And we can do this with animation or film. So for example, one of my favorite clips to analyze is this sequence in Star Wars. And if you just take a clip from your favorite movie, a scene that you felt really captured your imagination and made you just glued to the television, try to analyze what they did. How did they move the cameras? How did they frame the shots? Why did they use the angle they used? Why was it a close-up? Why was it a wide shot? Why was it an extreme close-up? What side of the screen characters were on? This can help you understand where to position your characters on screen and how best to portray a shot. That is crucial. You can have amazing animation, but if you're not framing it correctly, if you're not showing the audience showing the audience the best version of this shot, sometimes it won't matter. If you've got a terrible composition, it could ruin an animation, even if the animation is absolutely spectacular. So studying cinematography is huge. Now, a few books that I would recommend on that. The first one is The 5 C's of Cinematography, which I believe you can find in the Amazon link there, but also right here. That is a great book. It kind of teaches you the basics of cinematography and what to look for. So Oh wait, let's see. I have 0 drawing skill. Where should I start? The best thing I would say, if you have 0 drawing skill, well, actually, yeah, let's do that right now. So in terms of drawing skill, the Amazon stuff, there should be a button on screen. It should be like right on the right side above my head here. It should have like an Amazon like icon if you hover your mouse over it. There should be a little crown, and then underneath that a little smile thing. So in terms of drawing, where should you start? The first thing is basic exercises. And this can be tough because, well, as we want to draw, we want to make sure that we do the most that we can, and we want to do cool stuff. So it's hard to rein it back and just do simple studies. But for example, you'll notice I actually did it here, where it just looks like I did a lot of squiggles, but really what I was doing here was I was just practicing doing circles. So just practice, do a whole page of circles, small circles, large circles, and just get used to moving the pen and moving your arm correctly. This is a good warm-up to do. Trying to learn how to do nice, clean circles. This is a great exercise, just doing straight lines. Trying to draw and do straight lines in both directions. You could do horizontal lines, whichever. So doing these kind of exercises, this was ovals, just doing oval shapes and trying to make sure that they actually turned out oval. I think I did, what was another one? This is a fun one I like to do. There's 2 versions of this. The first is you do path drawing. So you just do a weird shape, something like that. And then you try to follow the path as fast as you can. It's like a race. And you try to stick to it as much as possible. This is something my brother taught me. And what that does is it practices your control over the pen. And you'll notice I haven't warmed up today. It's pretty terrible. This was one I did yesterday. And it was actually not so bad. I had a few areas where I went out, but pretty stationary. But this helps you just kind of practice. And you go in both directions. You do one in one direction, and then you do another shape. Just do really weird shapes. And then again, just try to... that was way off. Try to follow along. Now from there, the other test I like to do is, once again, just create a weird shape and try to give it depth. So this is just a quick doodle. It looks like nothing. But try to visualize what it would look like as a 3D shape. So for example, is it round in the middle here? Okay. And maybe at the end here, maybe it's kind of flatter right there. So all of a sudden, by doing these cross sections on the figure here, we can start to visualize what the shape of this is. It goes from a flat, just doodle, to potentially a new form. So maybe it goes around this way and then around there. But maybe over here we get a dip in the form right there. So you can start to try to visualize the shapes and the forms in 3D. And this is very important because when you think about it, that's what any drawing is. When we look at this leg, for example, it's not just 2 lines. It is a 3D form that is wrapping around like so. So if you can start visualizing this and visualizing how these lines can be an actual form. So for example, the chest, you get something like this, but then you also have the lat muscle here. So there's a little bump there. The inner leg, there's a muscle that goes right here. You actually get a bump right there. So being able to understand these forms allows you to visualize how the actual character will be. And this goes for any form. So for example, the back isn't round. The back dips in right here. And then once again, you have the latissimus muscle, the lats, right there. So that's another little bump there. Here, there's a plane in the hips right there. This is flat. That then wraps around this way. So even taking your gesture drawing, you can now use your gesture drawings. This is why I love gesture drawings, to start to push your understanding of anatomy. And basically, I'm taking the very basic exercise here, and then we are trying to apply it to different forms. And the gesture drawings I absolutely love gesture drawings because they lead to so much. You can do gesture drawings and then start applying anatomy like I did here. I was just trying to figure out the forms of the leg, form of the body, exaggerated of course, but really trying to exaggerate that. Let's see. I was talking about making shapes and tracing as fast as you can. I do it all the time when I get no idea what to draw. I didn't know that was an actual exercise. Yes, it's a great exercise because it practices your control over your pen. Let's see, the figure with the ears looks like storyboard Catra. Oh yeah. Yeah, I was doing where is it? Oh, well, actually let's go here. So this is another exercise I was doing, very similar in terms of trying to understand the planes of the body and where the lighting will fall. It's just taking that exercise that we were doing before, and you can even see there's the contour, and then just trying to push it to the next level. It leads to a lot of different things. So here I did a quick gesture drawing, and then I was just trying to understand the musculature very quickly. You can see it's very small drawings, but these are very good. So the first thing I would do is just do these very quick practices, and then from there move on to gesture drawing, and that's going to be a good start. And from there you'll just slowly build up your skills. So do you have any advice or a website for someone which never draws something correctly? What I would recommend is Proko. So the website Proko is a great one. It's on YouTube for learning basics of drawing and basics of anatomy. And for some reason it's loading really slow. There we go. So I would recommend checking this out. They've got a huge list of videos on basics of drawing in terms of anatomy, drawing basics, what tools you need. Now it's kind of geared towards more actual drawing, but it's really good. So I would recommend checking them out. And then checking out that list of books as well. So hopefully that helps. Now, kind of going back to the topic we were talking about, we've got composition, cinematography. These are really good things to really focus on, because as much as being able to draw is nice, and being able to pose something is good, and being able to animate is good, if we don't know how to put our character on screen, it's not going to be interesting. So for example, even just the camera here, if I have a composition where maybe I'm sitting this low on the screen, that's not an interesting composition. Like, there's a lot of empty space. It's not interesting to look at. Additionally, if I'm talking to someone and I pose myself right here, it feels awkward. I'm talking to someone, but there's no room in front of me. So little things like that, knowing where to position your character so that it leads the audience's eye in a conversation or in a body mechanic shot, that can be huge. And part of that is just studying those elements. Without that, we lose a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to know it, because as long as it looks decent on screen, that's fine. But we want to have better than decent. We want something that's really good. So That can be very, very useful. And once again, it's just going through films, pick your favorite films, and try to see why they are moving the characters the way they are. And I would recommend, again, the 5 C's of Cinematography. That's a great book to explain the concepts behind it. A good exercise to help improve your skills would be to take photos and experiment. Exactly. So you could draw things out. So you could do quick thumbnails. So I could just do a quick thumbnail here and, okay, how would I have a conversation between two people? Maybe have one character here and then the other character here. So we could draw things out like that. Or if you have a good phone camera, even if it's just a decent phone camera or a camera as well, take pictures of things, especially if you have toys. So you can just take some toys, some figures or action figures, whatever it is, place them together and try to take pictures of them to tell a story. That is a great little experiment because it allows you to very quickly get an idea of what changing the camera will do to the feeling of the image. So for example, what happens if you put the camera low and you're looking up at the character versus putting them down? That can be a great test. And you can do it in Maya as well. Pose out your character and then just move the camera and see what feeling you get. Or look at your favorite film, pick a sequence that you like, and try to recreate it a little bit in Maya or any program. Draw it out, thumbnail it. And again, study why they're doing these choices. Not just copying it, but analyzing why. That's the key thing here with master studies. It's not just copying, it's analyzing. For composition, okay, yeah. So composition, cinematography, very, very important. Now, kind of combining both this and drawing, the next thing I would recommend studying is storyboarding. Storyboarding is putting both of these together and starting to tell a story in a sequence. So using composition, cinematography, and quick drawings to tell a story. And storyboarding is not necessary. As animators, we usually are given storyboards to work off of. But if we know how to storyboard in a basic way, it allows us to sell our ideas much quicker and easier to a director, to our lead animator, without having to try and block in a shot and hopefully make that read. Now, right off the bat, the first thing I would recommend is checking out Directing the Story. This is a great book. I love this book. Here's the link. It's also in the Amazon blacksmith icon above my head there. Great book that allows you to learn how to storyboard. And what's really cool is it's done in storyboards. So as you're learning, the whole book is basically a big storyboard telling you a story on how to storyboard. It's really cool. I highly recommend this book. Now, again, why is this important? Well, because it lets us tell the story and showcase our animation much more clearly and visually. And it's just knowing even little things. For example, let's make a new layer here. When you're drawing a storyboard, one thing that can be very helpful is simply putting in a ground plane or a sky plane. So, for example, if we're looking up at a character and I just draw the character right here, this doesn't tell us much, does it? It's just a head. But if I do, hey, Fair, thank you so much for the subscription. Oh man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And oh, can I learn straight away digitally or should I use paper? Whichever you prefer. Honestly, there's no right or wrong way. You can do it on paper, you could do it digitally, you could do it in Maya, you could do it whatever way. And like I'm mentioning drawing here, but you could do it with like just posing characters in Maya or Blender or whatever it is that you want. It's really just the act of analyzing and paying attention to what you are doing. So with this, again, if I just draw the head here, it just kind of, the head is in a void. But one of the basic things about storyboarding is that when you're storyboarding, you draw a ground plane or a sky plane. So for example, I could just draw this very quickly. And suddenly, because we have that sky plane in place, when we look at the head now, we're looking up at the character. Suddenly we feel like the camera is low and we're looking up. It's a very simple trick, but it helps a lot. Likewise, if we put the ground plane right here, and now draw the character, we get a totally different feeling for the shot. It's a simple thing, but learning those little tricks suddenly adds clarity to our drawings, to our storyboard, to our direction that we want to give to someone else. Maybe we want to help someone else understand like the composition of their shot, or maybe we're asking the lead like, which way do you think the camera would work best here? And we can actually visualize it very quickly. So understanding storyboarding, understanding the process of visual storytelling through images is very, very good. So let's see, in terms of drawing, honestly, it's whatever you prefer. Like whether you prefer pencil and paper, use that. If you prefer digital, use that. And everyone's different. There is no, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Honestly, if someone tells you like, go digital, only digital, no, that's not true. Do both. There's no wrong way. Some people I know cannot draw digitally. They hate it. They like that tactile feeling. They love the feeling of, like when you're drawing with a pencil, you can feel it going onto the paper. With digital, especially with a tablet, not a Cintiq or something like that, you have that kind of disconnect. Other people, like me, I struggle drawing physically with pencil and paper because there's no undo button. I like my undo button. If you watch me drawing here, I undo a lot. So for me, I am comfortable drawing digitally. I feel that allows me to be creative and not get locked into things. When I'm drawing physically, I get very frustrated because I'm not very good at it. It takes me a long time and I keep making mistakes. Now, ideally, I should be practicing it more just because it's good to have both. But don't feel pressured into doing one or the other. Whichever one you feel more comfortable with, do it. For example, if you're doing digital or traditional drawing, just get a scanner. Scanners aren't that expensive nowadays. And then you draw everything physically, scan it in. You might do a little bit of cleanup on your computer, and then you can send it to your team. Done. There's no one way better than the other. It's really what you feel comfortable with. And it kind of goes back to animation, for example. What's better? Straight ahead animation, pose to pose animation, layered animation? Do you work with auto keys on or off? Do you use follow line on or off? None of it matters in the end, as long as you get a good product. What matters is how comfortable you are doing it and if it makes sense to you. If you're not comfortable and it doesn't make sense and you're struggling every step of the way, that's not the right way for you. So use the one that you feel comfortable with. It's good to learn others, but you can focus on the one that you're comfortable with, especially when you're starting. So let's see. Do you recommend drawing while you're in a moving vehicle? I always tend to have the free time on moving vehicle as I'm driving it. If you can, sure. If it's a very bumpy road, like where I live, it's all bumpy roads, I would not be able to draw. My lines would be everywhere. If you live in the city and the roads are nice and smooth, definitely, there's not a problem with that. Draw wherever you feel most comfortable. Some people draw in their beds, some people draw sitting on the couch, some people draw at their computer. Wherever you feel inspiration. So, let me catch up with the chat here. And Mortimus, thank you so much for the follow. You may get sick in the car. Yes, that's another thing. Some people get car sick very easily. I tend to get car sick if I'm not careful, so I can't really draw or read in the car. So, storyboarding, very important. And it's really just a mix of composition and drawing. So, gesture drawing, all of those. Now, going forward, the next thing is character studies. Now, character studies is looking at a film and trying to understand how that character would work, or how you would use that character in different situations. So this is one that I find helpful to first start off using pre-existing characters, but you can then start to branch off into your own characters. So what are character studies? Character studies is just trying to imagine how a character would do something. So, for example, how would they do something? How would they stand and sit? How would they express themselves when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're scared, when they're angry? How would they express themselves? How would they do something? And it could be a mundane thing. How would they drink a glass of water? How would they brush their hair? Take any situation and try to put different characters into that situation. This is a fun exercise in terms of animation because it forces us to try and understand how we would animate things differently. One of the key things that I tend to see new animators struggle with is that when they're shooting reference, when they are planning a shot, a lot of times they are not animating a character, they're animating a rig. So they're using the Stuart rig or the Zelda rig or whichever rig, and they're animating themselves doing the action. So, for example, if I was animating myself, let's say using my phone because I've got it right here. If I was using my phone, I usually use it one-handed, and I just kind of scroll around like this. That's it. But try to imagine a different character using it. So I'm just going to use kind of random characters here. What happens if you have an older person using the phone? How would they use the phone? Well, their eyesight might be bad. They're going to be holding it, and they're not going to be typing with their thumbs. They might even actually put the phone down and type with their fingers because they're used to a keyboard or typewriter, depending on how old they are. And every click is going to be like 1, 2, and they're really close to the phone because they can't quite see it clearly, versus like a teenager who's been texting since they were born and they're not even looking and they're just like whizzing around while they're also doing something else, versus someone who's like super angry and their shoulders are up, and how would they react? Try to take a scenario and put different characters into it. And what's fun is trying to imagine pre-existing characters. So for example, how would Darth Vader drink a glass of water? He's got a mask on. What would he do? Would he have to take off the mask? Would he just kind of pour it into the grill? How would Mickey Mouse drink a glass of water? How would, let's see, what other good characters are there? I'm trying to think really exaggerated characters. Dracula from Hotel T, of course. Yeah, Monique from Kim Possible. Like, just think of your favorite characters. Let's say Catra from She-Ra. How would she drink a glass of water? She hates water. So she would drink it very carefully. Johnny Bravo, that's a good example. How would he drink water? Like, you flex and like you have this really big change. So you try to imagine how these characters would do these different actions. And then what that does is it practices you for when you're doing your own characters, so that as you are animating your character, you are not having them do generic actions and just doing things the way you would do them. You are doing it the way the character would do them, and just gets you into that thought process. So I highly recommend this exercise. Don't take much time on it. This is a lot of these exercises here, you don't have to take a lot of time on. It's really just getting into the process of thinking about it. And again, this is where one of my favorite clips here, let me actually find it and just link it to everyone, because it's always fun to look at. So this is Big Hero 6. Many of you have seen this before, but basically the animators went through and did character tests to see how each character would sit in a chair. This is exactly what I was talking about here, is you take different characters, have them do an action, and try to understand why they are doing the action, how they would do the action. So here's the link, and let me make sure I type that in correctly. Boop. So definitely check that out and study it, because it is good practice. This is what you want to be able to achieve when you're animating a shot. You are not animating a rig doing an action. You're not animating a generic person doing an action. You are animating this character, this person doing an action, and every person is going to do something differently. They react to the world differently. So be very conscious of that when you are approaching your animations. So with that, let's see. Oh, and let's see. I know you passed it already, but for cinematography, do you have any books recommendations talking about action or fighting scenes? Don't know about fighting scenes. Like when you do a camera shake, when to do subtle moves, what to follow. I would check out the 5 C's of cinematography first. That one kind of covers a lot of different things. It's not really action oriented specifically, but it does cover a lot of the core concepts of cinematography, and for example, when you should lead, when you should follow, all of that stuff. It's kind of universal. Now, if you want specifics, what I would then do once you kind of have that understanding is study action films that you really like and see how they do it, because everyone's a little different. For example, Jackie Chan's cinematography and fight choreography is very different from The Avengers, which is very different from Jason Bourne, that series. They all apply things differently. So at that point, that's when you would start going into the master studies, because everyone kind of approaches them in a different way. Another one I would recommend is check out the Ip Man series. I forget the name of the choreographer in that show, but he is really good. He really has a good sense of how to frame up action scenes and fight scenes. So definitely check that out. Let's see. This morning in Doig Swift's stream, when talking about character movement, I really need to study it. Oh, nice. Yes. For anyone who doesn't know Doig Swift, they have a Twitch stream. You can find the link down below. Check them out. They are awesome. Very, very good. So we've got character studies. Character studies, very, very important, because in the end, that's what we're animating. We are not animating rigs. We're not animating just a movement. We are animating a character. Okay, so from there, let's move on from studies and go on to something else. Now, I'm just going to cover this really quickly, but improv and acting classes. If you really want to push your acting skills, your animation skills, animation is acting in a sense. Take improv and acting classes. Try to find some local classes in your area. You can even do some online. Now, I haven't really found any good online resources, but look for it. These will help a lot. And I just realized I mistyped improv. Improv. Let's see. Where's that? I have to fix this. It's bothering me. Let's see. Oh, it's locked. That's why. Improv. Boop. There we go. So, we've got improv and acting classes. Again, it's just going to help. As animators, we are actors in a sense. We are not acting ourselves on screen, but we are designing the performance of the character, and that is acting. So, making sure you know the basics of it. You don't have to be a full-fledged actor and take acting classes for the next 5 years or something, but understanding it a little bit can make your performance be more believable. And if you can shoot better, more believable reference, that makes taking that reference and exaggerating into animation much easier. So if you have the time, I highly recommend taking some improv and acting classes. They're just gonna help. So take care, Greg. Have a great night. So with that, the next thing I would recommend is pushing certain animation practices. So normally when we're doing animation practice, we tend to fall into the habit of always wanting to do big shots, always wanting to do a 300 frame body mechanics test or a full dialogue shot. We have the habit of wanting to do these big things to practice and to learn. And while those are helpful, they can be time consuming. And the problem with something that's time consuming is, especially when you're learning, it's not the best time to have something that's time consuming. Because if you're learning, the whole thing is that you're going to be making mistakes. That's the point of learning. The point of learning is to figure out what goes wrong, and then you learn how to fix it. If you're doing a 300 or a 600 frame shot every single time, that means that you're taking more and more time to start learning how to apply those fixes, to learn how to do something and then learn how to do it right. So what I recommend is do quick tests, 24 to 48 frame tests, like 1 to 2 second tests. You could make it a little longer, but try to keep it as short as possible. So for example, if you're struggling with body mechanics, do some quick tests on exactly what you want to do. If you have trouble having a character land and fall or collapse on the ground, instead of animating a whole parkour sequence that ends with them landing and falling on the ground, just cut out the whole beginning and just animate 2 seconds of them hitting the ground. Done. Don't worry about the rest. Just start with them in the air, hit the ground, collapse down. Done. Or maybe you're having trouble animating a character getting punched. Instead of having them do a whole boxing match that leads up to the punch, just animate them getting punched. Again, 24 to 48 frames. Done. It is fantastic how much those can help, because what this allows you to do is start learning how to do it properly, so that when you do get into your full shot that you want to put on your demo reel, that is not the point where you are learning and figuring things out. That is huge, and I don't see people do this nearly enough, unfortunately. So doing quick tests, and these can be body mechanics, they can be expression and thought changes. So if you're having trouble with facial expressions, do quick tests where instead of, again, a full acting shot where the character is emoting and acting and doing all of this stuff, do a quick test of someone just being angry and then smiling, and just that expression change. Or thinking, how do you get a character to feel like they're thinking or looking at something? How do you animate the eye darts? Instead of animating a whole shot and then trying to figure out, okay, how would I do the eye darts in 600 frames and make this look natural? Take 24 frames and make it feel, or 48 frames, and make it feel like the character is looking at something. And you do that multiple times. These tests can be done in a day. if not less. And it'll teach you so much. And then when you get to the big ones, you get, or you know what you're doing. You're still going to learn from them. You're going to learn new things, but you're not learning the basics, or you're not trying to struggle with understanding how you would do that one thing. See, would you say that for your first couple of rigs, it is good to have master studies, or even just have something doing a single pose? Reels. If you're talking about like reels for jobs, no. Master studies should not be on a reel. Master studies are for you, yourself, nothing else. If you post a master study on a reel, and this goes for shots that are like, let's say you want to animate a shot and you really like the way they shot a shot from Star Wars, let's say, and then you kind of take that and make it into your animation and basically just recreate that scene, but with a rig. That is not good to have on your reel, because what that tells a recruiter is that you don't know how to create your own ideas. You are just copying things. And even if you label it as master studies, go, hey, this is not a copy, I'm just using it for study. That's not the impression that they're going to get. So for a demo reel, do not put master studies of any kind on there. It should be original work. That's not to say you can't have master studies on your site and going, see, this is what I study and like my process. That's fine, but not on a reel. And then like a single pose, if you just have a pose on a reel, if it's an animation reel, that's not useful, because an animator or a recruiter is not looking for a pose. Maybe if it was like a concept art reel, or a designer reel, a modeler or rigger reel, not even a rigging, like a modeler reel, that could have a single pose on there. But for animation, no, because it doesn't tell the recruiter anything. If anything, it just kind of tells them that you're not sure how to animate something. It kind of creates a mixed message, if that makes sense. Animation reels should be animation. A pose as in like animating a jump or a head turn. Yeah, yes and no. Typically for a reel, you want to avoid basic exercises. So for example, a bouncing ball or a simple head turn. Unless it's really pushed and really dynamic, you want to try and push a little bit more in there, because otherwise it's basic mechanics. And on a reel, a recruiter, the bare minimum is that they expect that you already know basic mechanics. So everything on the reel should show more than that. Now, again, that is all comparative. So for example, a video game reel, they will want to see cycles. So walk cycles, run cycles, fight cycles. But again, if it's just a vanilla walk, that's not going to be interesting to them, because at the very least, an animator is kind of expected to be able to do a vanilla walk. So if all you have on your reel is a vanilla walk, that's not going to really impress them or go, oh yeah, they know how to do a cycle, nice. You want to do a character walk. Again, this where it comes into where character studies are very important, is how does this character walk? How does Jack and Daxter, how do they walk? How does Mario walk? How does Link walk? How does Nathan Drake walk? Try to think of these characters, and every one of them should ideally feel like a character and not just vanilla. So yeah, I would say unless it's a really, really well done test, simple exercises don't really have a place on a demo reel, like a job application demo reel, simply because that's showing that you know the minimum requirement for the position, if that makes sense. Would I be able to share my prompts for my pantomime shot? I would love to know what you think. Definitely. Let me just finish this, and then we can definitely go into some analysis and things like that. So, doing quick test, this is just for you to understand mechanics and concepts before you dive into a full shot. These are just for you, just for your own sake. Now, that's not to say sometimes you'll do a quick test, 24, 48 frames, and it just turns out gorgeous, which maybe then it can become a demo reel shot, or at least a portion of the demo reel. But the core is that you are using these as a learning experience before you get into the full shot. Now, from there, the next thing, lip sync. Do quick practice of lip sync. I never see anyone do this, and it's a real shame because lip sync is a very difficult thing to animate. And one of the things that's going to help you learn lip sync the best is just to do a quick shot with it. Take 2 or 3 hours and animate a quick lip sync. So what I mean by this is typically when students approach lip syncing, the first thing that they're going to do is add lip sync to their full shot. Now, that could be like a 200 frame shot, 200 frames of a character acting and moving and turning their head and doing all of this stuff. And then you have to add lip sync on top of that. And you have to have them emote and express and have all these changes in head angle, all of that, while also trying to think of how you do the mouth. That is very tricky. Instead, try to simplify it. So before you approach doing your lip sync on the full shot, take maybe just a portion of the lip sync. You don't have to do the full 200 frames, just like 2 or 3 lines. Again, 24 to 48 frames. And just do this, like below the eyes and then to the chin, right there. And animate the mouth. Keep the head still. Do this on a fresh scene and just animate that. And then you can have all the lip sync going through and trying to make it exaggerated and interesting and read well. And all you're focusing on is the mouth controls. Nothing else. Don't focus on the eyes. Don't focus on the neck, on the head. Don't focus on the shoulders, the body. You're literally just focusing on these controls right here and understanding how to animate lip sync. Once you have that understanding, again, 2 or 3 hours, just repeat that, like try a quick test. Oh, that didn't work. Delete it. Try it again. Didn't work. Deleted it. Try it again. And what you'll get is very quickly, you'll start to understand the workflow for it. Once you understand that, you can then take that and apply it onto your full shot. Because now you understand what steps you need to take. Do you do a jaw pass first? Do you just do the shapes of the mouth first? Do you start with the mouth corners? What feels right for you? Then you apply it to your whole shot. Instead of trying to apply lip sync to your whole shot, finding out it doesn't work, trying to redo it, and then you're wasting time. So quick tests are super helpful. And these can be done whenever you're bored or you're not sure what your next shot should be. Just try to focus on, what do I struggle with? Do I struggle with weight shifts? Do I struggle with eye direction? Do I struggle with expression changes? You can basically take any element that you struggle with and try a quick test with it. So for example, eye direction, that's a tricky one. Just have a character in 48 frames looking one direction, looking another, and just have them kind of look at different things. Something close, something far, and just like look at all the 4 corners of the screen even. And you'll very quickly start learning how to animate the eyes to focus on different directions. There you go. And again, you could just take like a few hours just to do it. Don't worry about polish, because hey, it doesn't have to be polished. It's not a full shot. It's just a quick test. So if it never gets out of blocking, who cares? That's the point. You are just there to improve your skills. So with that, the next thing is breakdown exploration. Now this is a fun test that I like to do whenever I'm kind of bored. Now I haven't had a chance to do it in a long time, but it's one that I really find it helps to broaden your imagination when it comes to posing. So breakdown exploration, what is that? Basically, breakdown exploration is a type of animation exercise where you take 3 poses. So these can be any poses. So maybe you have a character. Let's actually do this on an animation layer here. So I'm just going to delete these. Okay. So let's take 3 poses. So maybe you have a character and they start off maybe kind of just standing here. I'm just going to do some basic poses here. So you have a character standing, and then you do another pose. It doesn't even have to be really connected. It could be any random pose. So maybe the next pose is that they, let's see, what could I do? Let's do a simple change. So maybe they, let's see, maybe they'll come up here. They'll shift their weight a little bit. Maybe kind of bring this foot a little closer. Maybe they are kind of thinking, they bring their hand up to their face and kind of bring their hand up like that. And then the last pose, they could be, maybe there's a rail here and now they've jumped up onto the rail. And we just get this kind of pose here where they're hanging on. It could be big poses, it could be little poses, but you take 3 poses and then try to break down how they would move from one pose to the next. So, for example, let's take the big one because big poses are usually very easy. How would they get up to this pole? Well, do they jump? That would be one way of doing it. So maybe you have an anticipation here where they crouch down, kind of prep themselves for the jump, and then they jump up and they jump really high so that their feet kind of contact first. My little stick figure drawings. See, this is when you're drawing, you don't have to draw very well. Like, this is just very basic. So you have this breakdown right here where they anticipate down and then jump and land on the bar. But what if instead you do another breakdown where they might anticipate down, but instead of jumping up, they reach for the bar, kind of grab at it, and then they flip up over top. So now they are going up this way to contact the bar. So now they swing around and then hit the bar and land. And you try to do 3 variations. So you take 3 poses and then you make 3 variations of how the character would move from one pose to the next and then to the next. So even a simple one like this, how do they bring their hand up? Do they go, and bring their hand up to their chin like that? Do they go, So now it goes up, holds a little bit, and then comes down. So you're kind of adding an extra thought in there of, no. Or does it just go straight up? Or do they really, and like get this big anticipation into that pose? How do they change from one pose to the next? And you really try to come up with varied ways of doing this. That can really help to push your concept of breakdowns, which honestly, breakdowns are so important to animation. Your key poses, your key drawings, the strength of those drawings, how good they are is going to be huge in making sure your whole animation works together as a whole. But your breakdowns are what determine how interesting your animation is, how well it moves throughout the whole thing. So trying to do this exercise is a wonderful way of understanding how to push your breakdowns so that you don't just end up with boring breakdowns. The last thing you want is the breakdowns where, like, even if we do a simple test here, for example, you have a circle. Let's do this in a different color. So you have a circle, and then it's going to end up over here. Well, if you were to animate this in Maya, for example, Maya would just put that right in the middle. Boring, basic. If you have a character, it's the same thing. It's if you have just a character one way and then they just slide over to the next pose, boring. Well, how can we push that breakdown? Do we ease it out here so that it goes slowly and then fast over? Do we have it over here so that it goes fast and then eases in? Does it go up? Does it go down? Does it anticipate back? Do we put the breakdown over here? How do you describe that action? That is so important in animation. And this exercise basically forces you to start thinking about that, because you have to make 3 variations and make them different. Something I highly recommend. This one takes a little bit more time, but it's a fun exercise to do. Now we do have a few questions here. Let's see. Is this a good exercise for learning character weight thing in animation? Trying to make a character with abnormal weights and trying to keep the weight constant? Yeah, so that's a good exercise to do. Have a character lifting something and try to keep that weight consistent. Make sure that it doesn't start feeling lighter, doesn't feel heavier halfway through the scene, unless of course something like gets piled onto it and then you want to get that weight feeling suddenly heavier. Weight exercises are really good. As animators, a lot of the time the character is dealing with weight in one way or another, whether it's their own physical weight or carrying something, lifting something. It's always a good exercise to do. And then another question, do you think that this would be a good way in approaching lip syncs? Just animating someone talking in a foreign language? No, not to start with. If you're starting, try to pick a language you're familiar with, because every language tends to have different ways that the characters speak, not just the language itself, but the lip sync itself. To properly animate a foreign language, you actually have to study footage of how they speak, how they move their mouths. For example, with my French side of my family, the expressions tend to be much bigger. The lip sync is more exaggerated because in French, there's just a little bit more emphasis on certain sounds, especially like the rolling R's. My English side tend to be a little bit more subdued. Now, again, this also depends on personality, but if you look at different languages, for example, with Japanese, because it's more syllabic, it's these kind of, it's not pronounced quite the same way. The lip sync tends to be a little bit more clipped, a little bit more subdued compared to Western lip sync, where it's much bigger mouth shapes. Now, again, that all depends on the character. You can see some people who barely talk and barely move their lips. Others, they're super exaggerated with their mouth. But when you're first starting out, it's good to pick a language that you're used to, because you know how to speak that language. You know what the natural movement of the lips are. You've seen it your whole life. So once you understand that, then you can start trying to do other foreign languages and trying to see if you can replicate that. Now, the key to doing that very well is hopefully having someone you know that speaks that language. Because if you don't have any reference, like, hey, does this look right? You'll never know if it's actually right or not. So if you know, for example, you're animating someone speaking in Japanese, if you know someone who speaks Japanese, you can show it to them and go, does this feel right? And they can tell you whether it does or not. So yeah, pick the language you're used to first when you're first learning. And would you say just stick figures would be good in a reel? Just stick figures, no. If you're doing a 2D animation reel, 2D animation, it's a little different from CG animation. CG animation, basically, we're dealing with a rig, and as long as we have a decent variety of rigs, usually that's pretty good. With 2D animation, not only are you showing that you can animate in 2D, you have to show that you can animate in different styles in 2D. So can you do maybe something a little bit more realistic, kind of Disney-esque style? Can you do something really cartoony, maybe more Warner Brothers style? Now, you don't have to do every style in the world, but kind of making sure that you show that you have the draftsmanship skills necessary is very helpful, because in 2D, a lot of it is you have to draw the character that they want you to draw, even if you're using a rig. So, for example, with 2D rigs, you see these in, for example, the new DuckTales, the new Tangled series. They are using a rig to animate. But there are times when they will have to animate it by hand and draw the character in that style and match it to the rigs that are already existing. So being able to show that you know how to draw a variety of styles, so for example, more realistically proportioned characters, so let's say something like that. Even if it's, I would draw a little bit more detail there, versus maybe more cartoony characters that are kind of shorter and just big heads. Doing some animations with a variety of body shapes, that would be very nice to see. Now, you don't have to do that, but it's just going to show that you have that extra versatility, which is going to help push your reel further than just stick figures. Stick figures, again, it's try to imagine what the recruiters are looking for. And in terms of 2D, part of it is drawing. And stick figures are, not that they can't be well animated. If you look at a lot of stick figure animations on YouTube, some of them are jaw-droppingly gorgeous. But as a recruiter, they're assessing a lot of your different skills. So by showing just the stick figures, that tells them that you know the bare minimum, you know how to do stick figures good, but it doesn't tell them anything else, which is not what we want. So definitely try to push it a little bit more. So with that, we've got breakdown exploration. The last one here, or last one in terms of animation, is practice the principles. So if ever you're kind of stuck between shots and you want a little bit of a break but want to keep practicing animation, go back to practicing the principles. That's not a bad thing. Practicing the principles, everything is based on the principles. If you can understand those and really get a solid understanding of them, it's only going to help your shot. So for example, if you're between shots and you're not sure what to practice, just do some quick timing tests. Take a bouncing ball and try to give it different weights. Do a pendulum exercise. Do an overlap exercise. And if you look at the 12 principles of animation, just pick one or two of them and really try to work on pushing that. So for example, one of them is appeal. Well, how can you push the appeal of a pose? How can you make a pose that much more interesting? So just do a bunch of posing tests. And this kind of goes all the way back to the beginning of gesture drawings. Part of doing gesture drawings is learning how to push the appeal of a pose and make it exaggerated. Really push the feeling of motion in a pose that technically it's just a still frame. It's one pose, but you want to feel it like it's moving. So going back to those principles and understanding what makes them work. Once you do that, and it's good to refresh once in a while, if you can do that, what that'll do is just strengthen all of your animation. If you can really nail down timing and spacing, it's amazing how that pushes everything else, because honestly, all animation falls back to those two especially. You can really improve your animation in all aspects just by going back and doing simple tests with the principles and trying to understand that. And you can apply those in anything, when you're doing master studies, try to figure out how they are using those principles to make a shot feel that much more interesting, that much more appealing. How are they using the spacing? How are they using the timing? All of that applies. So those are the main exercises that I would recommend trying to do to push and level up your animation skills. Like I was saying at the beginning, these are good to do at any time, especially if you're kind of feeling tired of just doing animation and just doing shot after shot after shot. All of these are good to start exploring new skills and learning things that will all come back and to help your actual shots, especially doing the non-animation things. So for example, storyboarding, composition, character studies, drawing, all of those can be hugely helpful in pushing your core knowledge, and they all apply into animation in some way or another, which once you learn those, it just boosts everything up. Now, there are some other skills that I would recommend learning if you're into CG animation, which would be modeling, rigging, lighting, and rendering. Now, these, I would say, as animators, are not as helpful, because all of these skills basically help directly with creating better animations. Modeling, rigging, lighting, and rendering, they help make our scenes look better, which honestly is always nice. I like it when the scene looks cool. But they won't necessarily make the animation itself better. Now, of all of those three, modeling, rigging, lighting, rendering, rigging would probably be one of the more important ones, just because if we know how to rig a prop, if we know how to rig a stick so that it bends, we can make animations that are a little bit more fluid and interesting versus just having these simple, boring props. And the amount of rigging you need is very basic, honestly, in terms of, as animators, what we need to do with it. You don't need to learn character rigging and all of those super complex. That's a whole other field. But even just a little bit of rigging can be very nice. Learning how to do constraints, learning how to do all of those elements of Maya. And we've talked about them before in the stream. So for example, learning how to do blend shapes. Blend shapes can make it so that when you're animating, you can add all the neck muscles when characters start getting angry and you see all the tendons in there. You can add that into your rig. You can add the extra squints to the eyes or the wrinkles on the nose. The nose gets wrinkled when you sneer. You can add those into your rig, even if the rig doesn't allow you to do it, just by knowing how to do blend shapes. So by pushing your knowledge of these areas, it will definitely help boost the visual quality of your animations. But it doesn't apply as much to the core of your animation like these here. These will affect the entire core, the base of your animation, and boost everything up. The other ones, modeling, rigging, lighting, rendering, they make the final product look better. But if you don't know how to animate the final product, or to get to the final product in the first place, it's not going to make anything look better. It's polish, and if you polish dirt, it's still dirt. So you want to make sure you have gold by the end, and then polish that now as shiny gold, which is even better. I feel knowing some rigging can be pretty useful to make props. Yeah, so that's the big thing. It'll make certain things look better in terms of props, especially like bendy sticks, or just being able to have, even like, let's say you want a character playing with a keyboard. Knowing how to animate and rig a simple keyboard rig, just so you can move the keys very easily instead of trying to animate them by hand all the time. Or like a piano. If you have a character playing a piano, just knowing how to rig it basically so that you just move the keys properly and not have to animate them by hand in a very awkward way. It's going to help in many ways. And I would highly recommend, of all of them, rigging, probably number one. Modeling, probably number 2, simply because in order to get a good rig, you need a good model. And if you know how to model, you can make all sorts of interesting props instead of just a polygon cube and a polygon cube. Oh, and another polygon cube. Wow, we're really, we've got variety here. No, you can make a pen versus a phone versus a microphone versus anything else. You can make it look like that. And if you know how to do it properly, even better. And then afterwards, lighting and rendering is nice. The big thing with lighting and rendering, honestly, you would think it would be first because, hey, we can add lights and shadows and make our rig or our scenes look really nice. The problem with lighting and rendering is it could take of all of them, lighting and rendering can take an animation that looks really good and it has the possibility of either making it better or ruining the whole thing if you don't know how to do it right. Lighting and rendering is a whole field on its own, and if you're not sure or if you're not creating the lights just right or using them to plus the scene, oftentimes it can make certain motions hard to see. A hand gesture could get lost in shadow. The shadow itself could be causing issues where it's tangenting with things or distracting from the main motion. There's a lot of elements in lighting and rendering that can ruin an animation. For example, motion blur. If you're not sure how to do motion blur correctly, that can just make all of your animation, all the movement, not read at all. So I would say that's the last. First it would be rigging, then modeling, then lighting, rendering. What set of constraints should you use when we are throwing something? I would just use a blend parent, honestly, if you're using Maya. Blend parents, parent constraints are the ones that I use for pretty much anything. I very rarely use any other types of constraints, except for very specific situations. So, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Now, let's see. I know we had, Shigo, you had a link here. And then I think there was Boromark. You had asked about your pantomime shot, so definitely feel free to post that. And if anyone else has questions, definitely feel free to ask. Basically, this is the main exercises I would recommend for anyone wanting to push their animation skills to that next level, and focus on learning things that are not 100% just making new shots. Or specifically, not just animating. The animation practice, of course, is animation, but drawing, master studies, and acting classes, of everything you can do, those are huge in just boosting your core animation knowledge and ability to create interesting and dynamic shots. So hopefully that's helpful. And if anyone has other questions on that, definitely let me know. So let's check these links here. Okay, so Shigo, it looks... Okay, there we go. So let's take a look here. So we've got Shigo's shot here, and then let's take a look at Boromark's there. Okay, and if anyone else has questions, definitely feel free to ask. So let's see here. We've got a few drawings. Let me check those out. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So overall, I think the main motion of the body is working really well. The big thing I'm noticing is that the legs aren't matching the motion of the body, and also there doesn't seem to be any rotate Y in the chest and hips. The hips also seem to be missing a little bit of the up and down. So let's kind of break it down a little bit here at the beginning. So first, let's kind of focus on the hips. So let's actually, if ever you're focusing on one part, try to hide the rest. So I want to focus just on the hips. So I'm just going to focus right there. Try not to look at the legs. Yeah, the body feels very stiff. So it feels like the hips are just kind of in place and the legs are just moving underneath it with no connection, really, especially as it gets to speed. Now, that's not to say that the hips are doing this big motion as a character is running, but there is some sympathetic motion that does go in there. Now, this also goes into the body. The body itself feels very stiff, especially for the amount of motion that's going on the arms. And then the spine feels very, again, stiff, stuck in place for this run. So kind of focusing on getting that overlapping motion in the body, the maybe slightly more exaggerated rotate Y, really watching those mechanics of the body can be helpful. Now, this is not to say that the body is bouncing up and down as people run. If you watch sprinters, they're actually very stiff because all the muscles are engaged. But if they're leaning this far, there's definitely going to be some up and down and some overlap. If you actually watch sprinters, they actually tend to the sprint standing straight up because this reduces the amount of motion up and down when you're doing this. So with that, the next thing is the legs. So the legs feel disconnected to what the character is doing, especially here at the beginning. So for example, right here, this doesn't feel right. This is the passing pose right there, and the hips are already way out of balance. The passing pose should basically be like right, probably this frame or the frame before. This should be the passing pose. The hips are slightly forward right there. So that should be the passing pose. And then at this point, really watch your feet. You would start to get into, probably this would get close to pushing into a contact right here. And then this would probably be the contact there. Yeah. So kind of speeding that up a little bit. Same thing here. Really watch your foot mechanics. On an early pass, it's not that ideal, or I should say it's not that important to watch every frame of the foot, but you really want to make sure that you're actually getting the push offs, all of those, because without it, the foot mechanics won't work. If the foot mechanics don't work, the leg mechanics don't work, which at this point, none of the legs work. So really making sure to break down those foot contacts, especially since you're in splined. So you have the contact here, this frame, it should be flat. And because it's a run, you could even push it a little bit more so that it comes in, it's here, and then it just goes flat right there. So really making sure to look through those mechanics, watch your spacing of the heel, it kind of slows down midway. And kind of going back to even though it's a run, the kind of vanilla walk mechanics, really thinking of those elements, and then really studying the reference in terms of the arcs that the feet take and the extra motions that go through the body, especially the rotations, translations, all of that. Yeah, and then yeah, those would be my main notes on that. Let's look at the front view here. So on the front view, yeah, definitely the feet are very floaty at the beginning, and at the end there, they're very floppy. That's mostly because the contacts and the push-offs are not being exaggerated or put into place, I should say. Now you do have some lines of action here, but the main issue is that the contrapposto seems to be off. So for example, right here you have the hips angled this way, but then the shoulders are angled the same way, which shouldn't happen. The body and the hips should contrast each other. You would get this line here. And the reason this is helpful is right now what's happening is you're getting this curve in the body, this S curve. And S curves are the weakest of curves in the sense of as soon as you have an S curve, the character tends to feel like they're soft, they're weak. It creates this very relaxed pose. A run is not relaxed. So usually with a run, we want to aim for straights or C curves. This tends to give nice solid posing. So by pushing your curves like this will get you that nice C in there and that nice strength in the pose. So really watching your rotations through there. Yeah, really watching the moments when he speeds up and slows down. The foot mechanics they're feeling too floaty throughout. And then this is secondary, and you don't have to worry about it for this exercise, but it's something I would recommend pushing in future work, is try to avoid characters resetting to a rig pose. So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how when we're working, we want to animate characters. We want to animate a character who is running, not a rig that is running. Now, when you're first starting out, typically we're just doing a exercise, but what you can do to make that exercise a little bit more interesting is actually have a little character. And honestly, it actually sometimes makes things easier, because by adding personality, it gives us something to strive for. So, for example, at the end here, he just turns into basically T pose. Well, I should say A pose. This is an A pose here. So if you imagine just the letter A compared to a T pose, which is this. Instead of having that, who is this character? What did he do? Did he just finish the race? Did he... is he out of breath? What's happening with him? That will give you something to strive for at the end of the shot. Is he kind of winded? Where it's like, oh, just this is where you get that S pose, and the feet could be kind of like pointed inwards a little bit as his arm is kind of on his leg, and you just get that kind of like, oh, my sides, that side cramp. Is he victorious, in which case he would stand very tall and kind of like, yeah, he might be out of breath, but he's got this kind of victorious stance. You can see how that tells us two totally different characters just by having that pose versus the A pose. And this just helps the story. Now, the reason I mention this is you don't really have to go back to this pose. If this is just a test, just don't let him go back to the stopped pose. Just let him finish walking, and then that's it. So yeah, those would be my main notes for you. What I would actually do, just as kind of a warm-up, again, thinking of the quick test. So this shot is 241 frames. That's a lot to focus on. Try to do a 48 frame cycle, even maybe a 24 frame cycle. Do a vanilla walk, super quick. Just throw together a vanilla walk just to get the foot mechanics in place for 2 steps, and then do a quick run cycle, just a fresh run cycle at like a 48 frame run cycle. Just do that, starting from the run. Don't speed them up or slow them down. And what that'll do is it'll just kind of get you that kind of fresh perspective. This is something I do all the time in my own shots. If I'm struggling with a moment in a shot, instead of trying to fix the whole thing, I will take a step back and do a quick test. You don't even have to get into like polishing it, but just do a quick test to make sure you really understand those mechanics that you can then apply and kind of compare to what's not quite happening in your shot. That can really help diagnose issues much easier than just trying to push forward on a shot. So I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know. So let's see, there's a question here. What's a good place for learning acting? For learning acting, honestly, acting classes. Look up acting classes in your area. That's the best way. Because learning acting, you have to do, the best way to learn is to do it. And there's no better place to do it than in a class. If you just try to act on your own, you could try, but without feedback and without comments and without someone to give you notes, you're not going to grow as fast. So I would look up acting or improv classes in your area if you can. It's very important. Because in the sense of, you could do it on your own, but it's like animating without getting feedback or comments. If you're making mistakes, you don't know how to fix them, and you don't even know that they're happening until someone tells it to you. So learning anything, you learn much faster if you're in an environment where people can give you comments and notes. So let's see. They are full of professional acting courses. I don't want to do that. Plus I have a fear for camera and even hate my voice. Yeah, so that's, in that case, what I would do is read up acting books. If you don't want to go up in front of a class or to kind of put yourself out there, find some acting books. I believe there are some in the Amazon link above my head. If you hover over there with your mouse, it should pop up. There should be some acting books in there. I would recommend reading those and kind of trying to at least understand the concepts and the core elements of acting. So let me double check here, and then let's see, we've got Gabriella's link. Let me open that up here. Okay. So, and Joshua, I see your question. I'll just go over Mark's shot first, and then we'll go over your question. So these are some pantomime ideas. I would love to hear what you think. Awesome. Let's do that. So let's zoom in here. Jules is sexy, confident mariachi guitarist. In the scene, Jules claps his hand as his guitar is thrown to him from stage right. He elegantly lifts his hand to strum the first chord. When he begins to play, his guitar is out of tune. Jules is furious and marches off stage right. Okay, I already like the amount of character you have in this. This is fantastic. Now, one thing I will say, just in the technicality perspective, doing a guitar animation is tough because to properly strum the strings and all of that, it's nice to actually rig them. That's where rigging can come in. That's tough to do it right. Does it necessarily need to be there? No, it's just something to keep in mind. Let's see, Jules is a cool and suave jazz poet. In the scene, Jules is on stage dancing along top some jazz music. He goes to say his first line, and he forgets the words and gets stage fright. That's pretty good, especially because it's pantomime. He doesn't actually have to say it, so that could work very well. Tightrope walker who's terrified of heights. That could be interesting. Yeah, I like that. Okay, Quinn is at a swimming pool trying to enjoy an ice cream cone, and she can't get the ice cream close to her mouth because of the water wings. Okay, I like that one. I would just recommend not using the Quinn rig because it's your first acting shot. I would just recommend using one of the other rigs. They tend to be a little bit more robust. Let's see, the castaway shaman goes mad and falls in love with a coconut. I like that one. And then Quinn is picking her nose. So all of these are good. The main ones I like are the first two because there's a little bit more character to them. Now, this is simply, for all the other shots, is just adding a little bit more character. Who are they? What's their personality? Who is this person? for pantomime, that's going to be one of the big things, is really showing the character, who this person is, why they are doing the thing they are doing, and how they do it differently. Again, go back to that Big Hero 6 shot of characters sitting down. All of that is pantomime, is a character sitting. So honestly, the action the character is doing is not super important. It's the character behind the action. Now, with that said, the scene is always fun too. So, one thing I would avoid with this idea, just because I've seen it a lot, is the character being very confident, failing, and getting frustrated. That I've just seen it happen a lot, especially on stage. I've seen like 3 or 4 shots of a character doing something on stage, failing, getting angry, and then walking off. So, although I do love the idea, I've seen it quite often. Stage fright, though, I haven't seen that often. And one thing I do love about that is it's a lot of internal acting, where the character isn't being scared by something popping up and, oh no, jumping away. They're approaching the stage, looking out into the sea of audience members, and there's that internal, like, deer in the headlights moment as he tries to say something and can't. Or you could even have like the confidence in, oh, and then like that breakdown of, what are the lines? I don't know the lines. Oh no. And then there's that internal thought progression instead of just switching from one emotion to another. That's always fun to try to do. So let's see. Now, if he's a jazz poet, I don't know if dancing would help convey the idea. Now, to be fair, I've never seen jazz poetry or anything like that. But if he's dancing and then singing, it might be hard to kind of sell that idea. Plus, in terms of acting, dancing is not acting. Dancing is a synchronized set of body mechanics, which are very good to animate and very fun to animate. But in terms of acting, it's very hard to sell characters acting as they dance. So for the purposes of this shot, I would say it kind of takes away. Now, with that said, one thing you could do is, instead of having him dancing, and maybe this is what you mean by dancing, is maybe he's at the microphone and he's kind of listening along with the jazz music and is like, yeah. And then he kind of signals to the piano player and it's like, he's got this beat. So you just see that he's kind of this, like, he's not dancing. He's not doing a dance number, but he's dancing to the music. That's his personality, is he hears music and his toes begin to tap, and he's just got this, like, as he walks up to the microphone, you can see that he's got this personality. Instead of being stiff and boring, he doesn't just walk up to the microphone and then start talking. He's got this motion, and then when he takes the microphone, like how you see some people, they just grab the stand. Maybe he grabs the head of the microphone like this, and he gets in really close. So it's this more kind of dancing and suave effect, kind of pushing that element of it. So try to think of things like that, of how you can push the character. The tightrope walker is terrified of heights. Now there's an emotional change there. So that could work. But the problem with that is this comes down to backstory as well. Where if she's a tightrope walker, we assume she's kind of done this before. She's kind of she's gone through this process. So how is she terrified of heights, and how can we push the story element here? even though it's a short shot and there's not that much story in there, how can we push the progression in here and tell maybe a little bit more of an interesting backstory? For example, a cliche shot would be she climbs up, looks at the tightrope, and like you start with her confident, waving at the crowd, and then she goes to walk, and now she's scared and she doesn't go. That to me would be a kind of cliche. It's okay, but you have a character change, but it doesn't tell a story. It's just changing moods. But if you reverse it, this is a tightrope walker who is afraid of heights, but every night she does her act and she gets through it. So she climbs up, and you have that kind of like, as she's on the ladder, she might look down, just keep climbing it. It gets a little tenser, and then she kind of gets up onto the bar or the thing at the top of the platform, and hey, and then you can like get that confidence back where, okay, she's up here now. Okay, she's in her element, and you see her kind of getting over her fear, kind of letting the audience hype kind of bolster her, and then she goes out and does the performance. So you're basically telling the story of this tightrope walker who beats their fear every time, versus the cliche would be someone who's confident and then gets scared. But if this is their job, why are they being scared? What's different today versus any other day? I hope that makes sense. And it's one of those things that when I see kind of student reels, I kind of look out for is, does the story make sense in a grander scheme? If this was part of a film, for example. Now, I mentioned in your previous shot, you're thinking he's limbering himself up or lighting a cigarette, swirling a glass of wine. I like a glass of wine. That's definitely a nice suave feeling. The problem with a glass of wine is then you have to deal with water physics. I would try to avoid that. A cigarette would probably be better. Just it's simpler, and then at most you could add some smoke physics to the end of the cigarette, and that would work very nice. That's not too hard to do. So I would go with the cigarette personally. It's also easier to constrain, and you can do a lot with a cigarette. So you could have one of the long cigarettes like Cruella de Vil cigarettes. He could hold it between these fingers. He could hold it between those. You could do the Disney point, where Walt Disney, he would always point like this because he was always holding a cigarette. So you could have a lot of interesting acting choices based on how he holds the cigarette, and then he might like switch it in his hand. That's really fun. Whereas a glass of wine, you kind of just have to hold, and it's hard to switch around. So I like the cigarette idea a little bit more. Now, let's see. The castaway idea, I love. That's definitely a more comedic shot. The big thing is the character. Trying to push that element of the shot. So right now he just goes mad, and this is just where exploration would be needed. I like the core idea, but really try to understand who this character is. How does he go mad? And where's the personality change in that? Is him going mad what, like, is that what we want to focus on, or is the marriage to the coconut? And how can we push that contrast? It could be what would be the right word? The slow progression of him kind of like every day just getting worse and worse, and you could even do like a time lapse of like just quick time lapse of him slowly losing his mind. His hair gets more and more frazzled, something like that. You don't even have to do the coconut thing. It's just him losing his mind on a deserted island. If you're doing the coconut, then that would mean he's already gone mad, in which case, how can you push that element of it? How can you push that crazy, like, marriage aspect of it, if that makes sense? So I think on all of these, I think they're all good. Personally, I would say my favorite is number 2, just because it has a lot of subtle acting choices, or you could even make them less than subtle, that that can really push the character. Second, I like number 3, and then number 5 I do like, but I find it's, what's the right word, how to put this, the idea is funny, but the possibilities in acting feel less, or it feels like the acting is going to be secondary to the idea, versus the acting being the core, and then the idea pushing up that acting, if that makes sense. So those would be my main notes for you on that. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know. So let's see, there was another question here. In a walk cycle, and rotating a hip's z-axis, so when looking at the front, kind of like changing the hips, yeah, so that way, does the hip switch the direction of the rotate when it's the contact pose? Usually the switch happens between the contact and the down pose. So if you animate a hip on the, let's see if I can draw this here, on the contact pose, when the foot first contacts, it depends on how you animate the walk, but I'll kind of animate it this way. Usually the hip is going to be lower on that side in one style of walk, and then on the down pose, so when the body comes down and then this leg gets bent and then this leg gets bent, I apologize for the drawing. So as the body comes down, you then have this switch, so the hip goes up on that side. And basically it's on the contact pose, there's no weight being put on this leg yet. There's no weight there. All the weight's on the back leg. So the switch actually happens when in between those two poses, and that's when you get that weight shift and get that nice feeling of mass moving. If you shift the weight on the contact pose, it gives the impression that the character is anticipating the contact, and makes it takes away a lot of the weight in the walk. So hopefully that helps. Now let's see. Next up is Gabriella. So where's my page here? There we go. So let's take a quick look at this. So very nice. This is definitely a heavy walk. You've got a good side to side to it. So overall, I think this is working really well. I would say my main note, let's look at the side view here, is that the weight could be pushed a little bit more. Specifically, the side to side shifting, it feels like it's happening too soon. So I would, let's say this is your extreme right here, the side to side motion. As he goes into the contact, he already starts to shift over quite a ways, shifting his weight over to this point before you get into the down pose, which is here. And what I would do is try to ease that out a little bit more and then move a little faster in the middle. So on this pose, try to keep him a little bit more this way. This way you get that kind of that weight starting to shift over, and that mass. It takes a long time to get that weight to start moving. So it's going to ease out a little bit more. Then on the down pose, let's see. Let's go to your next extreme here. On the down pose, I would, let's see, that's there. How would I do this? I would keep the foot on the ground. So here, you could keep the body a little bit more this way still. So a little bit more screen right, and keep that foot down on the ground. What this is going to do is it's going to add more weight, because he's going to, how to put this, to create more weight, a character that's heavy is not going to want to stand on one leg too long, because the more you do, the more tiring it is. Having both feet on the ground longer is going to give them that feeling of weight, because, well, they're not lifting their legs as much. So by keeping that foot down a little longer here, it'll give you that ability to kind of keep pushing that body forward, and then as they lift their leg off the ground, let's actually look at it from the side view here. Like right here, you still keep that foot on the ground here. And then by holding it a little longer, what that does is it makes it so that the foot doesn't stay in the air as long. So it travels faster through the air, which gives a little bit more of a dynamic quality to the walk as well. So those would be my main notes on the legs. Now the next thing would be the forward translation of the body. Try to keep that a little bit more linear. He feels like he's doing this as he walks. There's this kind of hitch as he moves forward, which takes away a little bit from the physicality. If this is a heavy creature, the heavier the creature, the less likely that they're going to slow down mid-walk or speed up suddenly mid-walk, because there's a lot of weight that has to start getting put into motion. If you watch elephants walking, for example, it's just this big mass that is just constantly moving. They are not speeding up or slowing down that much. They are just walking, especially when they gain any speed. It's very hard to stop an elephant versus a mouse, which might run and then just stop and then run and stop and run and stop, because they're so light. There's not much mass there. So because this is a big, heavy, armored creature, we would want that to be a little bit more linear. It doesn't have to be perfectly linear, but try to avoid that start-stop effect. Which walks do you always try to have 2 keys? With walks, do you always try to have 2 keys for the Translate Z? I start with that, but then I don't worry about trying to keep it perfectly linear. This is not a natural walk, just a straight line. There will be a kind of wave to it, but it's going to be a very minimal wave. The only time this happens is if you're animating a robot, like a robot, which technically you could if you wanted to do it with this, because he is a robot, in a sense, a mech. But we just want to stop that start-stop effect. And then the same goes for the head, where if you watch the head, how it comes through here, and if we watch the spacing right through here, it basically comes to a full stop before then lurching forward. So keep that forward momentum going. Try to reduce the amount of overlap in the body, because basically what he's doing is he's lurching forward and then doing this, and lurching forward and then doing this, lurching forward, doing that, which doesn't give that feeling of weight, of just moving forward. You want to keep that forward translation going through there. And then I would reduce the amount of overlap in the arms, especially the elbows. If you think of the weight of that alone, like that's probably a few hundred pounds, or a few hundred, or 100 kilograms, or there's a lot of weight. It's a big iron thing. So it's not going to be waving around a lot. It'll be much heavier, kind of be pulled down towards the ground. So just watch out for how much you overlap things. So I think those would be my main notes. It's mostly the side to side and then the forward motion. Now, personally, I would probably reduce the amount of overlap on these things as well, just because those look like they're made out of metal, and when they're kind of flopping around, it it makes you wonder what everything else is made out of. Now, if you wanted them to flop around, what I would do is just change the material, the texture on them, to be something different, and then that way they don't feel like they're the same metal as the rest of the body. Maybe if you put it the same color as that part of the body. So hopefully that helps. Now let's see, there's a question here. I just graduated and started networking for advice on my show reel, and boy am I glad I did. I was told I wouldn't be hired on my current reel, so I'm going to spend the next 6 months making a new one. That's awesome. Well, not awesome that you were told that, but awesome that you have that initiative to make a new one. That's one of the big things with animation, is especially when you get started, we all have the dream of just like, we're gonna start and then get hired, no problem. That almost never happens. But the fact that you're working on your reel, you're pushing yourself, that's what's going to get you forward in the industry. So, yeah, keep that up. That's awesome that you have that drive there. And let's see, awesome job with getting advice and networking. Would you mind if I took a look at your demo reel though? Would love to, what level I need to continue to go to in order to get hired. Nice. So easing in is fast in or slow in? Can you briefly explain? So yeah, ease in, ease out, fast in, fast out, slow in, slow out. They're all the same concepts basically. So basically it's, if you have motion or a stopped, like no motion, how do you move out of it? So for example, if you have a hold, when you ease out of a hold, that means that you start slowly, you ease, and then you speed up. Same thing as a slow out. You start slow and then you speed up. Slow and then fast. So that's a slow out or an ease out. A ease in or a slow in is when you move fast and then you slow down to a stop afterwards. So you slow down or you ease into that motion or into that hold. Now a fast in and fast out is the opposite, where you start from a point and then you move fast. So you fast out, or you've got a point and you do a fast in. So if you think of, for example, a bouncing ball, bounce, bounce, like that, that is a fast in. It comes in fast to the ground, and then a fast out. It goes fast out of the ground. And then to the peak, we have an ease in and an ease out, or a slow in and a slow out. Same thing. Ease in, slow in is the exact same thing. So there you go. Fast, slow. That's really it. It's how quickly things move into a certain point. So hopefully that helps. And then let's see. I think there was, we had Jerome as well. Let's see, I think, okay, this one. There we go. So we've got some shot ideas here. So let's take a quick look at these. So we've got some pantomime. So Aya is boringly cooking a marshmallow, sitting on a log at a campfire. I already like this. She hears a werewolf howling in the wood and stands up excitedly. She pulls out a shotgun from her back and cranks it, preparing for the hunt. Okay, that's interesting. Mostly because it goes right out from what your normal expectation would be. So I really like that. Aya, a suburban lady doing gardening work and being focused on her task. A car honk, it's a neighbor. So she waves at the car happily. As soon as the car is passed, she rolls her eyes and is disgusted because she hates the neighbor. Okay, that is a very relatable, I shouldn't say relatable, it's, what would be the word? Like, we all know that person. So that could be interesting. And then let's see, a young kid is sitting on a kitchen chair and is about to eat his favorite dessert. He's illuminated and she's about to get it. A hand is pulling the dessert and switch a plate to a vegetable plate. Okay, so I like that idea, but I've seen that a lot of times. So I have no neighbors, honestly. I would actually like to have neighbors. I've never had that experience of, oh, my neighbors, hello. I've never had that. My neighbors are so far away that I don't see them. So um, I don't know what it's like to have a neighbor. No, actually, I do. I did have a neighbor at one point, and they were super nice. That was when I worked at the bakery. So I would not do number 3 simply because I've seen that idea many times. It's just I've 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 seen it on a lot of reels. Now the first 2, I have seen kind of this general idea before, but it's something that is so kind of unique, or is the idea itself is not unique, but the scenario can be anything that it works regardless. So with that, I would say my main notes on this. The main note I would have is with number 2, it's the car honk. Mostly because we never know when the recruiter is going to be animate or to be listening to our reel with or without sound. Ideally, they should be listening to it with sound because that's how they hear the dialogue, but you never know. So I would just tweak this so that it's something visual, like a car driving by or something along that. You could add the car horn as well, but by having something slightly visual, it will give us that indicator of what's going on. So basically just make sure you don't rely on the car horn. Even if it's something like she's gardening and she looks up, oh hi, and that's it. Like visually we can see that she's reacting to something off screen. That would be enough. You don't actually have to have a car in there. So not that the car horn is bad, it's just make sure you have that visual element too. Now, one thing here, like let's get the technical stuff out of the way first. A fire in the camp. That's going to be tricky to do. Now, I would recommend if you do want to do a fire is just get an image of a fire, like an image sequence, and then put it on there, especially ideally with some transparency. So you're basically making a sprite, an image plane with an actual fire in place, and then that'll get you the fire without having to do any physics simulation or anything like that. That's going to be much easier and still sell the idea very well. Now, the main thing, and this is specifically for your reel, is this section right here. She pulls out a shotgun and pumps the shotgun. Your last shot that you did has someone pulling out a Gatling gun and firing a Gatling gun. We're starting to see a pattern here. Is that bad? Not necessarily, but if you are planning on using that other shot on your reel later on, you suddenly have 2 shots that have a similar idea. So in that sense, I would say number 2 is more of the choice to go with, because it is unique and adds to your reel and adds something new to your reel. So I think the main idea here, and this goes for both shots, regardless of which one you pick, is really trying to figure out who the character is. Try to come up with 3 adjectives that describe them, and then this will influence whatever they are doing. So for example, she's doing some gardening. Well, regardless of the gardening it is, maybe she's moving a wheelbarrow, maybe she's on her hands and knees and putting things in the dirt, maybe she's got a shovel, maybe whatever it is, maybe she's pruning some branches like with some clippers or something like that. There's a lot of different things you could do in terms of gardening and yard work. But what is her personality? Is she lazy? Is she energetic? Is she one of those people that kind of walks through the yard and like, oh, my beautiful flowers, and it's just like very dainty and loving with her flowers? Is it one of those people that just like she has to do the artwork but she hates it and it's like, ugh, flowers, and just like cutting without really paying attention? Things like that can add a lot to a shot like this. Let's see. Yeah, I think that would be my main note on both of these, is trying to come up with a little bit more of the character. In terms of the actual stories for both of these, I think they both work. And like I said, I wouldn't do number 3. And if you're planning on doing or keeping that last shot that you did, I would try to come up with a new idea for number 1. Just because it's kind of the same as the first or the last shot that you did. So those would be my main notes for you. Hopefully that helps. And definitely let me know if you have any questions. Let's see. So let me catch up with the chat here. I think that's it. Yay. So, if anyone else has questions, definitely feel free to ask. But if not, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to cover for today. I think those are my main notes that I wanted to cover today. Basically, let's go back and do a quick recap. Is if you are wanting to expand your animation skills into new areas and into ways that allow you to keep practicing animation without having to constantly animate new full shots and only focusing on demo reel shot after demo reel shot after demo reel shot, which gets kind of tiring after a while. These are things I would highly recommend you try to pursue and try to look into as possible things to practice. All of these will help you to push your skills as an animator in different ways and just make you a more versatile animator. So these are all things that I definitely recommend. Learning how to draw, doing gesture drawing and anatomy studies. And you don't have to learn how to draw and be able to do Disney quality animation. Basically just learning how to create quick gestures like I showed earlier here, where none of these I would say are finished drawings or something that I would put up on an like ArtStation page or anything like that, but they allow me to quickly get a gesture in and understand the line of action, understand how to create the feeling of motion in a still drawing. Doing anatomy studies, knowing where the body attaches and how it attaches, how it moves. Again, we don't need to know all the names of every muscle, but it just helps us with that extra knowledge that we can apply to our shots. Master studies of anything, this is probably the biggest one. And analyzing animation, analyzing composition and cinematography, learning about cinematography and storyboarding, doing character studies, trying to figure out how we can push the acting of a character, how we can push the feeling that we're animating a character and not a rig. Taking improv and acting classes, that's huge. It's probably one of the tougher ones to do because you actually have to go out and take classes to really do it properly, but it does add so much in terms of your ability to create believable performances. And then doing quick animation practice, not animating full shots, but just doing quick tests. I wish I saw more people doing these. Most of the animators I know, especially the students, never do quick tests. It's always trying to push the next big animation. And taking the time, even if it's just an hour or two, to do a quick, super rough test is amazing how much that can push your animation skills and knowledge without getting bogged down into big details. So hopefully that helps. So let's see. There's 2 questions here. Going back to the question I was going on before about the weight shifts on the hip, but for a standard walk, would the hip be most rotated on the down pose or afterwards? It really depends. No walk is a standard walk. Everyone walks differently. So for example, on the passing pose, some people on the passing pose, so let's kind of exaggerate here, the hip is going to be down on that side. Some people on the passing pose, it's going to be up on that side. It just depends on the person, depends on their energy level. It changes a lot about the walk. Some people walk with a double bounce in their step. Some people walk with a heavy weight shift. This is where I would recommend just studying the walks of the person you kind of want. So for example, if you're animating kind of a heavier character, study the walks of people who walk very heavily. If you're trying to do a very light person, study the walks of a light person. See what happens with their hips. There's no absolute question for, or no absolute answer for that. Now, if you're going with the vanilla walk, which technically is not a true walk, it's just kind of basic concepts, then typically the down isn't going to be the most extreme. I'll have the passing or the up be the most extreme, because that way the hips don't feel like they bounce. If the down is the lowest and then pops back up right after, it tends to give the feeling that the hips bounce and are like a bouncing ball hitting the ground versus the weight being dragged down. So I try to avoid it being the extreme. Even if it's just a few frames of an offset, that can be enough. So let's see. When do we know we're ready? Or to be more serious, what are the minimum requirements to get an internship in a feature film studio? Like, do they expect you to master acting and lip sync, or pantomime body, or are pantomime and body mechanics enough? Again, there's no true answer for that, for both questions. So in case of internships, they all have different requirements. Sometimes internships are basically for students, which means as long as you have proper body mechanics and things like that, you apply for, you would be applicable for that internship. Other times internships are for basically full animators, which means that you have to have acting and lip sync and all of that stuff on your application reel. And even in those, there's exceptions. Sometimes you might not have acting shots, but the recruiter or the internship will see that you have just that potential. Your ideas are solid and you really have a strong grasp, so they'll let you go in early regardless. So it's there's no true answer to when you're going to be ready. The big thing is looking at the requirements for the internship and then kind of basing yourself off of that. Now, in the case of when do we know we're ready? Honestly, you'll never feel like you're ready. When I graduated, I did not feel like I was ready to apply for any jobs. I know many people who feel like they're not ready whatsoever, and then they apply and they get a job. And in general, as animators, we tend to be down on ourselves about our own skills. So the biggest thing I would recommend is, this is where having a network comes in. And if you're an animation mentor, what makes it so powerful is you basically have a network of people you could ask these questions. Have other people look at your reel and ask them, do you think I'm ready? And that will give you that answer. Now, you want to make sure it's people you trust, because sometimes you'll ask that question and they'll just go, yeah, it's great. And which is one of the worst answers people can give, is just, looks good. you want constructive criticism. That's always going to be much better. But having that network of people to ask is going to be crucial. Now, the other way you can kind of figure out, let's say you're on your own and you want to know, like, am I ready to apply to this studio? Is take your reel, put it on screen, take work from the studio you're applying to, ideally like their latest film, and put them side by side and look at them objectively and go, does my reel, does the animation quality feel like it would fit in that film? Now the style might be different, but do I feel like when I'm looking at both of these, my animation could be in that world? If the answer is maybe, okay, you might be ready. If it's no, and you see this big disparity between the work on your reel and the work on that show, you might not be ready for that studio yet. And Tiki, thank you so much for the subscription. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Aw, thank you. Even as a junior? Now this is where it's tricky, because as a junior, the whole point is that you're learning. But I would say even as a junior, it kind of applies. So you're not looking to see that you're like a fit for, like, yeah, my animation, it matches theirs, and oh my god, it's even better than Disney's animation. It's almost never going to be, because they have a whole team of animators working on that. You're alone. But if you feel like, okay, I could see, like, I need to fix a few things, but I feel like I'm getting close to that, then I would say yes. If you look at it and there's just like no connection whatsoever, like they are just, your shot doesn't even compare, which to be honest is going to be most student work when you first start out, it doesn't stop you from applying, but just keep in mind that you probably won't get the job. Typically studios are looking for not super experienced people, because they do want to train juniors, but you want to make sure all your body mechanics, all your core is in place. So I would say it's not a be-all end-all test, and again, you don't want to make sure that your animation is at their level, because at that point you should have been working for them already. But if you really see a huge disparity, that could tell you that you're not quite ready to apply to there just yet. So let me catch up with the chat here. In a climbing shot, if a person is hanging on a rock and he pushes it and pulls to reach to the other one, how it affects the shoulder. I would look at reference. So shoot reference of that, and then you'll see what happens with the shoulders. Typically, shoulders move sympathetically with the body, which means if I reach forward, my shoulder goes forward. If I reach up, my shoulder goes up. But when we're pushing on something, our shoulders we might reach forward, and I just hit the mic. We might reach forward, but our shoulders go back because we're pushing on something. So I would just study the reference and really analyze what's happening with the shoulders in there. That'll help you kind of understand the mechanics in there. Let's see. Thank you for all your advice. Oh, my pleasure. The stream was very interesting. I'll follow your advice and start practicing on short shots. It's time to go to bed. Oh, take care, Tiki. Have a great night. So let's see. I think there was another question. I mean, if my reel looked like a movie, I would be hired everywhere, but unfortunately I'm still learning. Yeah, exactly. So you're not looking to make sure that it looks like the movie, and I should be clear on that. You're just looking to see if you could imagine if your style of animation, or sorry, your level of animation right now, if you were to work on a film, do you feel like you would be able to keep up at that level that they are creating? For example, let's go with an extreme example. If you're doing body mechanics and you've got body mechanics only on your shot, no acting, no nothing, it's just a body mechanics animation, and then you look at a Pixar animation, well, they have acting, they have lip sync, they have dialogue, which means that if you were to be hired at Disney, that's the stuff you're going to be expected to do. Do you know how to do that? If the answer is no, likely they're probably not going to hire you, because they will train you to work on the shots, but they're not going to teach you animation. They're going to just train you how to do it in their style. They're not there to mentor you into an animator, if that makes sense. So the same thing with, let's say, I'm applying to ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. They do a lot of VFX work. If my reel is all cartoony shots, really, really exaggerated cartoony, even though it's amazingly animated, if I compare my two reels, I've got this cartoony character, this lizard or this T-Rex that's walking down with his tiny little arms, happy down the street, and then I compare it to Jurassic Park. Would my T-Rex fit in that world? No. Do I have anything on my reel, my super cartoony reel, that would fit in ILM's style of shots? No. Would they hire me? Probably not. Even if my animation was amazing, like Disney, like quality, rendered everything, they still wouldn't hire me because my work doesn't fit with the studio's style. So I would need to make sure that I add some shots that would work with their style, more realistic, more VFX style shots. So that's what I mean, is that you're comparing your work and seeing if you feel like it would add to that film, if that makes sense. So hopefully that helps. And again, it's not a be-all end-all. This is where that network is helpful, because having people to ask and give you advice on, am I actually ready? Do you think I could work at this studio? That's going to be the best above all, because it's hard to compare our own work and be absolutely honest about our own shots. It's a tricky thing to do. So, let's see. With that, does anyone else have a few questions? Yes. Do you think there are more jobs in game animation? I don't know about more. It fluctuates. Definitely game animation is a lot of fun though. And I find it's a little bit easier to find small indie jobs. So in that sense, I guess maybe there you could consider there's more jobs. Kind of. Just because it tends to be easier to find small indie companies than small indie studios. Especially for CG work. Also, is it more reliable, stable to work in game animation rather than feature? No, not really. Neither is absolutely stable. The animation is a very volatile career, unfortunately. Unless you have a lot of experience, you're the start of your career, expect to jump from studio to studio. It's just part of it. When you first get started, you're going to be hired as kind of the extra animators to help things get finished. And then once the project's over, more than likely you're going to be let go, and then you're going to have to find more work. If they liked your work and if they have other projects in line, then yeah, they might hire you right back. But we are contract workers, which means we do not work and have we don't just work at a place for 30 years and then retire. We are contract workers, which means after a project is done, after our contract is done, it's over and we have to reapply. Even Disney and DreamWorks and all of these employees, they tend to be contract workers, which even though they work there year after year after year, technically they have to reapply and kind of stay like for the next project. So yeah, it's neither is more reliable than the other. I would say games, there tends to be a little bit more no, not even. I was going to say there's more stability, but it really depends on the studio. Some studios, they'll work on a game and then once it's done, they go back to development, which means they don't need animators for a while, which means you don't have a job. Studios are the same thing. If you're working at a studio, sometimes if you're working for Disney, there's always a new project in the works. They have that budget to just keep pumping projects out. If you're working at a small indie company, once their project is done, they might go back and start working on a new one, but they're not going to be animating for a while, which means they're not going to need you anymore. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answers the question. Is it okay to ask HR or animator on LinkedIn from my dream company if I'm ready? Yeah, if you want to, how to say this, if you approach them respectfully, yeah, definitely feel free to contact them. Don't expect a response. It's very rare that they will respond just because there's so many people, but it's not a bad thing. And in many ways you can kind of create a connection between yourself and the animator or the HR department, as long as you're doing it with the best of intentions. Yeah, it's not bad. Again though, just be aware that they probably won't answer because they get very busy. Also, when doing either film or game animation, would it be better to be submitting more fully rendered shots or things more like Playblast? Playblast all the way. As animators, a rendered shot means nothing in our demo reel. It looks pretty and that's it. And even then, oftentimes it actually detracts from animation. When you are applying for any studio, unless you've got a lighter and a rigger, for example, you've worked on a film and they gave you the final rendered version that you worked on at Disney, a Playblast is 100% fine. No recruiter expects anything to be more than a Playblast. As long as it looks clear, your composition is good, and you're not just like gray on gray on gray, like making sure things stand out so they can be seen. That's all you need. So yes, Playblast all the way. If we are working on our reel, but are not taking an AM class at the moment, could we still post our work on our AM profile? Definitely. You can definitely post your work, ask for feedback on the AM campus. Once you're in AM, or Animation Mentor, you are part of that community forever. So once you graduate, it could be 10 years down the line, and if you want to come back and just start posting work and asking for feedback on the campus, do so. There's nothing stopping you. You are part of the AM community, and they're there to help you. So when working in the animation industry, do you find that people are moving around a lot to get the jobs they want? I understand that one will most likely have to move at least once, maybe twice, but does it happen frequently? Unfortunately, yes, especially early on. When you are building in your experience, be prepared to move often. Be prepared to relocate, even move around the world. Sometimes you'll get jobs. I know some animators who got jobs in, for example, they lived in the US, then they got a job in Canada, then they got a job in London, and then they got a job, where was the next place? I think New Zealand, and then they got a job back in the US. It can happen that you just move your whole career. Now, as you get more experience, and especially as you get a family and kind of you aren't able to move around as easily as much when you were young and alone, it is possible to set down roots in an area and work from there. Usually it'll be kind of in an area like Vancouver, Montreal, like kind of this big hub of animation. And then you're just going to be either working at one place more consistently, or kind of jumping from studio to studio. So especially if you're freelance animator, you'll tend to have like these studios that you just bounce from back and forth as they finish projects. And this is basically, you build up your reputation and they know you work well, and whenever they need another animator, they'll just get you on board right away. So yeah, be prepared to move. It's just part of it. Now, is it always a part of it? No. I know of some animators who basically never moved. They lived in the area and there was an animation studio there. They got hired and they've been there or bouncing between studios in their area right from day one. If you're lucky enough to live in an area like that, you might not have to move at all. Or, for example, for me, I've never had to move for a studio because I do everything remotely and freelance. So I've been very lucky in that sense that I've never had to move for a studio or an animation job. That that's just I was very lucky in that sense. So, yeah. If I don't have a degree, can I get a work visa for a foreign company or country? Yes, it's a little harder, but it is possible. So, a degree will help you get a visa, but a degree won't be the be all end all. It doesn't guarantee a visa, and you can get a visa without a degree. Usually, I forget the term for it. Every country is a little different. There's different visas you can apply for, and if you don't have a degree, there's a specific one that you can apply for that tends to be a little bit more likely. It's a shorter term visa, but it can work. Now, it is still difficult. With or without a degree, getting a visa is difficult because in general, countries want to hire, or they want companies to hire people from their own country. So, for example, in Canada, the Canadian government would prefer that companies hire Canadians because, well, taxes and all of that. In the US, same thing. They would prefer that companies hire US citizens. In the UK, they would prefer people from the UK. This is just how countries work. With that said, it's not impossible. I know a lot of people who move around from country to country. It's just trickier. So, let's see. I think, does anyone else have any other questions before we call it here? See, I like all these questions. Let me think here. I'm trying to think if there's any other things on those topics. I think that's pretty much everything. I'm not familiar with visas, I will say that, to know any of the ins and outs. Unfortunately, I've never had to apply for one. So, again, I'm lucky in that sense, but it is one of those things that you just kind of have to talk with your embassy or with someone who's already gotten a visa in your country. Let's see, gonna get some hot wings and enjoy the rest of the night. Nice, that sounds like a good night. So with that, I guess we can call it here. Let's go full screen just because. So thank you everyone for hanging out, for listening to me yammer on about all of these different things. Hopefully it was fun and interesting. John, good luck in your class. Class in an hour. Is that an AM class? That's interesting that you have it on Monday. That's awesome. Early class. Yes. So hope you all... Oh, Ray Ross. Okay, yeah, that explains it. So hope you all have a wonderful week. For those of you starting Animation Mentor, best of luck this term. I hope it all goes well. And if you ever have any questions, definitely feel free to ask anytime. So with that, take care, everyone. I'll see you around, and all the best. Bye.